Good evening and welcome. This is Simply Frank. Thank you very much for all the good things you've been saying about the show and indeed about the station. What is the main topic in the world? The war between Israel, with the help of the USA, against Iran. That has impacted the world economy, and in particular, the supply of oil. Recently, the president revealed that Israel-USA-Iran war has serious impact on the world economy and indeed that of Zambia. He went on to say, all the economic gains, and this include the growth of the economy by about 4%, would be wiped out, depending on how long this war goes on. Tonight, we look at the impact of this war on the production, on the supply of oil, fuel in particular, in this country. My guest is an expert on energy, and he's the proprietor of Northwestern Energy Corporation, Andrew Kamanga. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you very much. Good evening. It's always nice to be in your presence.
Thank you very much. Before we talk about the thrust of our discussion this evening, just give us a background of Northwestern Energy Corporation.
Well, Northwestern Energy is the first private electricity distribution company which operates in the northwestern part of the country. So we are in Solwezi, Lumwana, and Kalumbila, and basically our model is to buy power in bulk, and then we've invested in the reticulation infrastructure, and then we supply power to our customers who are mainly residential, commercial, as well as industrial. So in summary, that's what we do under Northwestern. But today, I'm here as a consultant. As you know, we also run in another company called Enfin Limited, which is basically a consultants firm where we specialize in energy, mining, as well as infrastructure projects, as well as providing advisory. So today I'm wearing the cap of an advisor on energy under Enfin.
Welcome. Before we talk about what is happening in the Middle East, 62 years down the line, Andrew, most parts of our country don't have power. Are you surprised?
Well, it's a combination of both. As you said, when you look at where we were just post-independence, the economy was quite small. The population was small. 62 years later, everything has increased. But it's a question of how the policymakers have been able to adapt to the changes that have happened. So to a certain extent, I think the planning for the provision of power still remains a key activity, which in my view needs to be looked at as long term. And I think previously I've mentioned that we need to have an energy master plan, which basically shows us what we need to generate, the energy mix that has to be there. And of course, at the end of the day, the pricing or the tariff is what will determine where the electricity will be distributed. But also government has a role to play in ensuring that access to energy is assured, because at the end of the day, we really need to make sure that there's access of electricity by almost all the citizens. And this is why even at an international scale, we've got the M300, where there's an initiative to ensure that energy or electricity access is given to as many people on the continent as possible. So we are no exception.
Let me ask you a loaded in a question, here. The country recently first, load shedding, which has had an impact on, energy production, distribution that led to load there, shedding. How did you survive? And from this, what lessons have you learned? And how have you evolved? And how do you hope to evolve going in future?
Well, we start from the beginning. Yes, the load shedding has always been a challenge. And I was just mentioning a couple of weeks ago that it's nothing new.
Yeah.
We had it during the time of MMD when RB was president. They had to import electricity using the ship out of Mozambique. We equally had it, I think it was somewhere around 2015 under the PF when late President Lungu was in charge. And they were also equally able to import. But this time round, when we had it 2 or 3 years ago, the solution was a bit different. This is where we've seen a change in direction with the coming in of power traders who've obviously come in to plug the gap. And the market has obviously been opened up to allow open access. Consumers can freely import their power using the ZESCO network and indeed any other person's network. But the ultimate is that we've moved away from a single buyer market to a market where a consumer is free to buy power from wherever it's available. And the biggest issue that has come out of all this, which has seen the survival of the power traders, is obviously the fact that the market has been able to bring in or come at different tariffs, which has sent a completely different signal, because all along we've had challenges with tariff, and the coming in of traders has also helped to reposition the market insofar as the electricity pricing is concerned. So these are still learning points for everybody, but we hope that sustainability of the market is going to be assured. Most importantly, we also need to plan for the energy mix. I've been a proponent of pushing that we get as much coal-fired power to supplement what is happening with the hydro. Because in situations where, as we've seen recently, when you have a drought, you generate less. So we need to have an energy mix which is robust. Solar has equally come into the equation as a stopgap measure. But of course, as you'd expect, solar is not base load. It's only there during the day. Of course, there are systems where it's backed up by battery, but where you don't have battery, you only have at least 10 to 12 hours supply. So these are the dynamics that need to be looked at. So going forward, I think in the last 3 months, there's been a stable supply of electricity. We hope it's going to be sustainable. As a company, we obviously had a lot of challenges. We had to survive by buying expensive power to ensure that our customers were well serviced. But going forward, we are also diversifying the risk.
Excellent.
We want to go into solar generation. We equally are looking at coal-fired thermal plant. We are also looking at investing in some regional transmission networks so that we are able to sell the power as and when we have it. So going forward, this is why we made an announcement just a few weeks ago that we are going to list our company, because the size of investment that we are now looking at is obviously going to be huge. And we believe that doing a listing and bringing in the public to be part of the company will help us to diversify the risk away from the mining into generation as well as transmission. But most importantly, we are just securing our license from Southern African Power Pool, which will also allow us to start trading power within the region.
the consumer is extremely important, in this. What does that mean? What does listing mean to the consumer, to the public?
Well, I think listing for us is a means of raising capital so that we are able to fund the expansion. And once we fund the expansion, we are basically guaranteeing supply of electricity, hopefully to be affordable by the consumers. We do have different types of customers. We do have retail customers, commercial, as well as industrial. And being in a regulated market, our residential customers pay the regulated price that ERB sets. So whatever our customers are paying is exactly what they would still be paying under the ZESCO scheme.
The thrust of our interview, this evening is about what is happening in the Middle East and the impact on oil, on fuel. First, to start with, what is the current status of the oil industry in this country? Who are the players? How is it, managed?
Well, like I always try to do, nowadays people see things from where they are.
Yeah.
And we always forget about the history. And I've always made it a point that before I give a perspective of where we are, we always have to look at where we are coming from.
Absolutely.
So when you look at the oil industry, it's an industry which was basically very compact. So prior to privatization, government was responsible for the importation, distribution, and supply of fuel. And then post-privatization, we saw Zambian National Oil Company was the single importer of crude oil. Indeni was equally, in fact, Tazama was transporting the crude oil. And then we had Indeni doing the refining. And at that time, we only had 5 oil marketing companies. And that's how small the industry was.
Yeah.
And then around 97, ERB came in and started regulating by giving licenses to all the players in the industry. And fast forward to where we are today. Again, as I said, history is important. From 5 oil marketing companies, today we have 85 plus. In terms of filling stations, we are sitting at over 650 filling stations countrywide. The market has become very competitive. When you look at the structure, even the pricing, today the pricing is based on cost plus, which basically looks at the cost of imported crude oil. In fact, now we are using finished product because previously we had crude.
Yeah.
But you price it and then use all the elements within the transport, the necessary charges, taxes. Before you get to a wholesale price, you add the dealer's margin, and then you've got your retail price, which is at the pump. Over the last couple of years, you must have seen that every month we've got prices being adjusted. And the reason is simple. When the cargo is priced, we obviously look at the projected cost recovery. And this is where the exchange rate becomes a key factor in setting the price for the following month, to a point where you ensure that you are able to recover the cost of the imported fuel. The problems Zambia National Oil Company used to have, they would import fuel, fail to recover the cost, and then obviously the end result was to go into liquidation. Today the market has been liberalized, it's open, that's why the numbers have increased. But what we are seeing also is a situation where I think the market, yes, it's open, it's liberalized, the prices are set, they change every month. For me, what is very, very key is how do we manage the challenges such as the current situation, where suddenly the prices of oil are going up on the international market. Pre-war prices were sitting at anywhere between 62 and $70 per barrel.
Yeah.
When the war started, the price started shooting. Last week, it even went as high as 120. This week, there was an announcement that the war is over. It's gone down to about 110. So the impact is yet to be felt here. Now, as a country, landlocked, the economy has to continue functioning. And I think this is where it becomes very, very important that we need to have physical, strategic fuel reserves in the country. Again, to give you an example, why it was always difficult for one to be an investor in the oil sector. It was very simple. One needed to have either leased or owned fuel depot facilities. There was a requirement as part of the license condition that one needed to keep a certain quantity physical stock within the country as part of your license condition. Over time, that requirement was taken out, and I think this is why we've seen a huge number of oil marketing companies, because the market has become easy to enter. Anybody can just have enough for the truckloads, get your license, start trading, and that's it. I'll give you an example. In my other assignment, I'm a liquidator for a company called Continental Oil in liquidation. At the point when I took charge of the assignment, I was able to sell the 5 filling stations when the company went into liquidation. It was easy to sell the filling stations because the locations were superb. So those were taken up. And I've struggled to sell the depot because the moment that requirement was taken out that you don't need to have storage either owned or leased, because one would easily get a hospitality agreement to keep the physical stock. I've been struggling to sell the depot. So it tells you that if we had that requirement, it should have been very, very easy for me to sell the depot. So I think lessons learned, the regulators as well as government, even as they reflect on the challenge that is before us now, we really need to step up in terms of ensuring that we have enough fuel physical reserves within the country. That is a must, because if we have a war, which obviously doesn't affects us, maybe medium to long term, what we are seeing now is a situation where we should have really had a lot of stock within to be able to survive. I listened to a number of statements from both the ERB and the Minister of Energy. They've been talking about having enough 15 days, maybe maximum 30 days, but that may not be enough for the size of the economy that we are running. And especially that you did indicate that all the gains that we've made over time, when it comes to the GDP, when it comes to managing inflation, when it comes to even managing the exchange rate, all these parameters will start shifting. And as they start shifting, we may start seeing a situation where fuel becomes a bit of a challenge on the market. It may not be there. The oil marketing companies may be accused of hoarding, but as you know, every oil marketing company that has stock, I think it's better to get cash than keep the fuel. Of course, one would argue and say you can hold and sell it at a higher price, but I really doubt if one would be keeping fuel and not selling it.
Right. In a current situation, and even going forward, in relation to what is happening in the Middle East, first, You started by alluding to the fact that anybody can enter the sector. I want to look at the implications of that. I also want you to look at the implications of the oil companies, the way they operate. This is a free, market. How does ERB relate into all this? And what is the best scenario?
Well, I think insofar as the war is concerned, yes, it's definitely going to be a big issue for us. As you know, Iran is the third largest producer of oil. I think they are producing about 35 million barrels per day, which is quite huge. They're the third out of the 10 OPEC member producers. And for us, we've had a situation where the market has been opened up. I think we also had the issue of open access in terms of usage of the Tazama pipeline as well as the storage facility in Ndola. So the fuel has been able to get into the market. But as I said earlier, yes, it's good to liberalize, but these OMCs should also be subjected to regulation. And I think this is where the license condition, when it comes to ERB, they have to continuously review them. As I stated earlier, in the past, it was a requirement for one to hold physical stock. But now it's not there. So suddenly, you've got people who are cashing in. Anybody can come and trade. But we really need to reinforce the regulation. ERB issues licenses for importation, transportation, retail, wholesale, distribution. It's a whole range of licenses under the Energy Regulation Act, Article 10.1 and 10.2 of 2019. But these things evolve. Even now, we should be calling for emergency measures. We should be thinking about if this war is going to last another 2 months, another 3 months, another 1 year. How do we manage our situation as a country to ensure that we insulate ourselves from the effects of the war? So I think planning is very, very key. And I'm sure government must be taking care of these areas. But as a people, we also have a responsibility to ensure that we are prepared adequately. Because any distortion that will come out of any fuel pricing impact, it will destabilize the whole economy. Transport costs will start going up. The same commodity prices, which have been stabilized over time, will equally start going up. So the dynamics are fairly sensitive. And we can see that this situation of the war has a big bearing on how our economy is going to survive.
How much can the president do? He recently held discussions with, oil, companies. What can he do? Again, I repeat, this is a free economy. He can't hold them to ransom. He can't, threaten them. What can he do? These are businessmen, Andrew, who are in it to make a profit. They're not there for sentimental, reasons. How do you reconcile this?
Well, it's very easy. Everybody wants to make a return. That's why I keep emphasizing the regulator has a big role to play in all this. And this is where they have to show their muscle. And this is where, for instance, license conditions have to be evaluated. Do we have to insist? How much do we need to include as a minimum physical stock for each oil marketing company? Because those are the things which will determine where we go. Yes, the president was right to call for a meeting. and obviously give government's position to the oil marketing company. But at the end of the day, they also want to make sure that it's a matter of supply and demand.
Yep.
But at the same time, like I keep emphasizing, the regulator this time round has got a bigger role to play because they have to look at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Look at the planning. Where are we? What are we doing? What do we need? How much fuel realistically do we have? And remember that when it comes to the fuel, 70% of our consumption is diesel, and petrol only accounts for less than 30%. So when you've got that big consumption, we should now be thinking about how much diesel should we be bringing in country to balance against the effects of this war, and to what extent, how long is this war going to last? I think those are the real challenges for the day.
You keep on, making reference to ERB, and the importance of ERB cannot be overemphasized. Is our ERB providing leadership? Andrew, because from where I sit, we're hearing more of a political voice from the Minister of Energy.
Well, like I said, I think the regulator has got a role to play because they are the ones who issue the licenses.
Yeah.
They can decide the terms and conditions for the license in light of whatever is obtaining. So today, as we speak, ERB is in a stronger position to adjust the license conditions to reflect the reality of what we are going through today. That is their role. Government, on the other side, equally has a role to play because they have to drive the policy position. They equally have to ensure that they can deal with issues of strategic reserves because that is away from the open market activities. So both government and ERB have a role to play insofar as these challenges are concerned.
Before we move to alternatives, Andrew, just a side issue. When you place Indeni here, it's more like moribund in here. What service did Indeni provide? Was it a useful service? Why is it that it seems that it's been discarded in all this?
I think it's, again, a matter of the background, the history.
Yeah.
Indeni was a joint venture between the Zambian government and the Italians, government. Of course, on the other side, on the transportation, we had Tazama, where it's a joint venture between the Zambian government and Tanzanian government. Now, remember, from history, when the pipeline was first set up, it was bringing in finished product.
Yeah.
And then we ran into a problem during the time of UDI. And then we obviously had to adapt. Fuel was actually being brought by trucks, which was quite expensive. And then the government at the time decided to bring in the what they called the commingled crude oil.
Yeah.
And that was just a combination of diesel and a few other chemicals. And then they would now move that on the pipeline and then get it refined at Indeni. So that was the role of Indeni. It was to refine. In fact, there's been a lot of debate around what one would call it. Others were saying it's a separating unit. But regardless, product was being refined at Indeni, and it would be taken to the terminal for distribution to the oil marketing company. That has since changed. Today we are having imported product coming in, both on the Tazama pipeline as well as the rail network, if you are using Tazara. And you are also getting a lot of fuel by trucks from the same corridor, whether it's on the Tanzanian side, the South African side, even on the Mozambican side, we are getting fuel. So all these dynamics obviously having a bearing on the availability of product. I think there's been some initiatives to try and get a pipeline into Chirundu. So there are so many ways that others are looking at to ensure that we are able to sustain. So, Indeni, to answer your question, at the time it was a critical national asset. It's been overtaken by the events that have allowed for bringing in of finished product. But of course, the market at the end of the day is what is important. We have to ensure that fuel is available at the right price, in the right quantities, and the consumers can take it.
The minister has been talking about route to Angola. Is this the way to go? What are the advantages and challenges?
Well, again, when you look at the fuel from Angola, it's obviously not refined.
Yeah.
You would obviously have to go through a certain process. It's the same as the one you'd get from Dangote now. There's a lot of interest within Africa to try and see if you could get fuel from that corridor. But at the end of the day, the infrastructure has to be readily available to be able to service us. We hope that one day we'll be able to get fuel into the Zambian market through Angola. I think there's been some initiatives by some local investors to put up a pipeline, but again, as long as these projects are still being talked about and they've not seen the light of day, we just focus on the traditional means of delivery of the fuel.
Why is it taking such a long time for Africa to come up with a massive, refinery entity? I mean, I know now Dangote has, gone into that. Is it a question of capital investment, which is a problem?
Well, it's also a case of, yes, capital is a big factor, but also the market size. I mean, even ourselves, when you look at Zambia as a market, it's not very big when it comes to when you compare with other markets. So those are the parameters which determine the economies of scale in terms of where you are going to operate your infrastructure. So even the Dangote, yes, it took a bit of time to put it together. Yeah, it's working, but at the end of the day, it's the economies of scale which will determine that level of investment. It's not cheap. It's quite expensive, but we also need to have a big market which can take the product.
Before we talk about the lessons that have been derived or that should be derived from this, Andrew, I mean, the obvious, question is exploration. The countries, including Zambia, that has been exploring, for oil, which in the end, would be perhaps the answer. But having said that, there are others who say, oil is a curse. How do you reconcile that?
Well, I think when it comes to exploration, I don't know how things work, but I always refer to history. I think it was in 2008, I was appointed to sit on the Petroleum Committee.
Yeah.
It was a presidential appointment because at that time they were looking at the country had been mapped and blocks had been identified, and exploration for oil was basically going to start.
Yeah.
In fact, I think one or two started, but with the change of government, I think our appointments lapsed when PF came into office in 2011. And up to this day, I've never heard of the Petroleum Committee. We don't know. I've never heard of anybody doing exploration.
Yeah.
Everything has basically gone with whoever was in charge. And I think at the time it was MMD. But it's the same with the mining industry. If you look at Zambia today, yes, we are talking about getting 3 million copper production by the year 2030.
Yeah.
But you see, copper mining, like anything else, we need to invest more in exploration because that's what will determine where your next big mine is going to come from. So it's not any different from oil. So the exploration takes much longer. People have to be patient until you are able to make a break. Only then do you see yourself benefiting. Uganda is an example.
Yeah.
They discovered oil. It's taken long, but slowly but surely they are getting there.
Yeah.
So even here, these are things which whoever is in charge of the policy should start going back and checking.
Yeah.
Because really, by this time, as I said, we were on that committee in 2008. It's almost 18 years.
Yeah.
It's been quiet. But if the exploration had been going on, I'm sure by this time would have seen something. So again, these are policies where we have to be more forward-looking and then ensure that ultimately we are able to manage the energy needs of the country.
In certain dire situations like the one we're facing now, they're not only losers, in this situation, they're also winners. What are the winners? Who are the winners in this situation? And how concerned are you as a businessman, as a Zambian? What are the concerns, for Zambia? What am I saying? There are some players who'd like this war to continue for their own benefits.
Well, like everything else, when you talk about the economy, there's always speculation.
Yeah.
Those who sit on the other side, at the end of the day, even in this setup, it will be a question of supply and demand determining the price.
Yeah.
So if others who speculate, which I'm sure they are, you've got forward markets.
Yeah.
These international traders have specialized. You've got hedging of the markets. So there are different financial instruments which can be used to ensure that you protect yourself. But like everything else, the market is open. Whoever has got the product and they're able to bring it in and they're able to meet the requirements, they will obviously cash in because supply and demand will always be the driver of where things should be and where the price will be.
Let's again talk about the implications here. Which sectors do you see mostly being hit, by what is happening in the Middle East?
Well, without doubt, you look at transportation, you look at manufacturing, you look at all the parameters. The moment you have prices increasing, it goes without saying. Even the other consumables, the prices will go up. Yeah. Salaries will become an issue. So everything else is a function of what the price will be. So it's quite a worrisome situation. And I'm quite confident that the powers that be, they've taken short, medium, and long-term measures to contain this situation. But granted, we are likely to see the price of fuel going up and the prices of transportation going up. All the prices will increase. Because when you say, for instance, when you look at price of transportation going up, agriculture obviously is our mainstay of the economy. We are just going to get into the new harvest season. The product has to be moved, or maize has to be moved to the storage. So whoever is transporting, definitely there will be that cost increase. So these are the things which you eventually see even in the price of maize. So we really have to have the situation contained. Even fertilizer prices may go up. Of course, now we have inland production, but it's the transportation within which becomes a key factor insofar as the cost of delivery of even inputs is concerned.
Let me learn question, Andrew. The lessons in every situation, one has to learn, lessons. What lessons should the government, this country, businessmen learn from this?
Well, we don't even have to learn lessons.
Yeah,
we have to live with.
How should we react? Maybe let me rephrase that question. How should the country, the government in particular, react with the future in mind?
The answer is simple.
Yeah.
Long-term planning is what to ensure that we take care of all the situations that are before us. So if we didn't plan for the war and we find that the war is there and we did have enough strategic reserves to last 3 months, 6 months, I wouldn't even be worried about what's happening.
Yeah.
But if we don't have physical stock in the country, then we are in trouble. Then we have to now look at emergency measures. And anything that's emergency is a cost. And you have to pay the price.
Let me ask you a question. I know you're not a politician. Wherever, government officials, president is, seated, what could be going through his mind? Is he thinking about the political repercussions? What could be going through, opposition, leaders, the other people on the other side, taking advantage of the political, situation that may emanate, from this? I'm pushing you against the wall.
Well, I think whether you like it or not, I'm an economist and I can speak authoritatively.
Yeah.
From that perspective. The reality today, we are basically how many months? Maybe 4 months away from the national elections. Yeah. So anything that happens in the next 4 months is a big deal towards the decision that the citizens will be making. If I'm sitting on the government side, I have to make sure that I contain the prices as much as I can, provide the electricity, provide the fuel, make sure all the commodities prices are affordable, because any distortion will be an advantage for the opposition. But the reality is that whether it's the government of the day or the opposition, no one has control over the events that have happened outside. But also, very, very important, which I think we've not been able to address fairly and squarely, is the communication. Yeah. We should be seeing a situation where, whether it's opposition or government, we should be realistic with the expectations. If government today announces that the price of fuel is going to go up, the justification for that decision should be easy to explain, because we all know it's on account of the war. So even if the opposition are politicking, they would equally be doing the same if they were sitting in government. But ultimately, like I said, wherever we are, whatever we are doing, the role of government and the policymakers is to have long-term planning.
I hope the Minister of Information is watching you talk about the importance of dissemination. And why do I say this already. People are starting buying in bulk.
Well, that's why I made a point that the regulator has got a role to play.
Yeah.
Of course, buying in bulk is speculation, like everything else.
Yeah.
It's also an economic. If I can hold goods and sell them at a higher price. But this is where now the relevant bodies of government should be on red alert to ensure that these things continue to be available to the citizens. And as you rightly pointed out, communication is very important.
Yeah.
And talking about the politics, it's so funny that we've been getting more political statements which are devoid of the economic agenda. I've not listened to anyone who's saying, look, our alternative economic platform is going to be ABCD. All we hear about is people fighting who's the candidate, who's going to do what. What's not coming out clearly is what they are going to do.
Absolutely.
And I think this is the missing link. And I did share with you a couple of weeks ago saying what we need to have maybe is a roundtable discussion. Look at where we were post 1991 and where we are. It's a 26-year period. We've had so many things happening. But the key in all those, it's been mining, it's been agriculture, it's been energy, it's been industry. To what extent are we diversifying our economy away from mining? Today, yes, we can talk about 3 million tons of copper from the mining industry. But the reality is that these mines are not owned by the government. And the role of government, where I stand, is to collect taxes. And those are the taxes that we should be seeing from an increased production. Yes, the numbers are good. We can sing the song, we are bringing in $10 billion worth of investment. But how does that trickle down to the guy on the street? In terms of affordability, what is their ability to meet their day-to-day needs? So we need to reconcile the macroeconomic aspects with the micros. And then at the end of the day, build an economy which will last long. We have to invest, get a return. The investors have to be there. But most importantly for me, we also need to see more local investors. It's a shame that 60 years after independence, we still don't have billionaires in Zambia.
Absolutely.
All the mines are owned by foreigners. Even our own sector, like the power sector, I've been an advocate. I've spoken to almost all the presidents from the 90s up to where we are. And I've always argued and said, look, why don't you use the energy sector as a tool for economic development? You can empower your citizens. We can restructure the energy sector, especially the power sector, where we now have power distribution companies in all the 10 provinces, in different towns. End of the day, the same power that is being sold by ZESCO will still be distributed. But the agreements are possible. So it's food for thought.
Tell me, Andrew, you raised a very important, issue, the roundtable, discussion you talked about. Why is this country today devoid of a high-level, discussion on economic and social, issues since this situation started in Middle East? There's been very little, discussion. You expect agencies like, Economic Association, the Oil Association, all the players involved to sit together and discuss, this for the benefit of the country.
Well, I think it's the signs of the times. I'll give you an example. Many years ago, I used to be a member of Economic Association of Zambia. Those days, every month end, there was a topic for discussion. Every month end. And the EAZ used to act and provide the checks and balances. Every month we had a topical issue. But all that has disappeared because there's been so much focus on politics. And yet the same politics is driven by the economy. So we really need to reset the clock and get back to the basics where we can say, can we have an economic discussion?
Yeah.
Even now, if you read the comments on what I've said today, you will be able to see. Others will be arguing this one belongs to that political party. This one, he's saying this because he's in the opposition, he's anti-government. There is no such thing. The economy is what it is.
Right.
We all have a duty to contribute. And I think this is where even the government of the day should really be worried. Why are we not having these conversations? Because ultimately these conversations shape the policy of what government is doing. And it's only important that we allow economic discourse to be a prism for those who are the experts, and then ultimately shape the policy of how government is going forward. But today everything is political, and the politics, unfortunately, is all anchored around the 5-year term. Every politician's focus is, today I win, I must survive, and you're not planning long term. But at the end of the day, this country needs to be planned for the next 20 years, next 50 years. That's how we grow as a country.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything seems to be political, even football. I don't want to go, that way. Finally, with all the challenges that we have discussed, Andrew, in the last 55 minutes, are you still confident, that Northwestern Energy Corporation is in the right space? Its future is positive?
Yeah, very, very positive. I think for me, last month, we had the Africa Energy Endeavor in Cape Town, and we actually sponsored a session on transmission networks across Africa, because what we are seeing is within Southern African Power Pool, yes, a lot is being done. We have the Eastern African Power Pool. We also have the Western African Power Pool. We need to get the interconnection to be seamless. And even where we are, the opportunities in the power sector today are sitting on the transmission networks. Yes, there's been a lot of emphasis, especially on the generation, whether we are talking about Mamba increasing their output to 600 megawatts, new solar plants coming up, and more hydro projects coming up. But there's little being said about the transmission infrastructure. We may fix the generation challenge, but a time will come when we'll start struggling with transmission. We need to open up transmission. We need more interconnectors with the other countries. Yes, there's a few happening. We have ENI Power doing the Kalumbila into Kolwezi. We have CEC doing another interconnector into DRC. We have Kanona doing the Zambia-Tanzania interconnector. But we need more.
Right.
And ultimately, when you talk about the power sector, there's a lot that can be done. We need to bring in other sources of electricity generation. We could use gas. We can import gas, do a pipeline, produce power. So there's so many ways we can skin the cat, as they say.
Right.
But the opportunity for the power sector, it's still strong. And we see our company also growing. We are planning for the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, but we are ready.
Excellent. Before my final question, which is very obvious. Before we wind up, we from Simply Frank and BMTV, and on behalf of the director of BMTV, would like to extend our condolences to the family of the lady who was brutally murdered in Kalumbila. This cannot be condoned. So for us at BMTV, we extend our condolences. Finally, I've asked you this question, before, but times evolve. We've talked about the challenges, that we having in the Middle East. If we walk out of these studios, again, you're a Christian, we meet Jesus on the way. What issues would you raise that are cardinal to you as a person, as a businessman, as a Zambian?
Well, I think for me, what is important is just ensuring that the country remains united in the face of the challenges that we have. I think we've not done well to focus on unity. Mm-hmm. There's so much bickering, there's so much politics, and we seemingly are losing the national fiber to unite. And I think for me, from a Christian point, in fact, on Sunday, I was a guest of honor at St. Paul's Church in my capacity as a national patron for the Boys Brigade. We had an event for the Synod Presbytery Bishop who was celebrating his 22 years of service to the church. It was a wonderful event, but we need to ensure that as a country, we all move in one direction. Yeah. Politics should only come once in 5 years, but at the end of the day, the welfare of the citizens need to be addressed by those who are in positions of authority. Hunger is a big issue. People should have the ability to survive. Mm-hmm. We need to sort out the infrastructure. Yeah. We need to make sure that life becomes affordable.
Absolutely.
And ultimately, that's what would define where we go.
Andrew, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
This has been, Simply Frank. On the program today, we featured Andrew Kamanga, who is the proprietor of Northwestern Energy Corporation. And we looked at issues, affecting the world as a result of the Middle East, war. Whether you like it or not, the word God must be embraced by all the leaders and all the peoples of this world. From all of us, this is Frank, and this has been Simply Frank. Good night to you.